Hello crafty friends, welcome to my April 2019 10 cards 1 kit video using the Love From Lizi card kit. I'm jumping right in with some ink blending, and I grabbed one of my distress inks and an ink blending tool to darken up this cardstock, and you can see it's kind of hard to see what you're doing as you're kind of in the zone and working on it, but when you compare it to that little offcut that I had there, it really is changing the tone of this piece. And I also grabbed a paper distresser and just ran that along the edges of this piece because I wanted to give it kind of more of a vintage and worn look, because I wanted this map to kind of look old and worn in, and using some distress ink and just kind of ripping up the edges just worked perfectly for this piece. Then I'm going to grab my cut apart. This is the Pack Your Bags cut apart. I was really excited about this one when I did my unboxing video, and I was saying how great it would be to receive a card with this sentiment, perhaps with some kind of tickets for a holiday or some kind of a night away inside, and so I knew I wanted to use this on one of my cards today. Just sticking with my distress ink, I inked up the edges just to help that pop off the base, and just using that ink kind of helped everything tie in so the colours would all kind of match, and it would match more with the cream card base. And then I'm going to go and do the same thing and just ink up the edges of the aeroplane to help it kind of pop off the base. It almost gives the effect of matting and layering, but just with ink, so it's a lot quicker and easier. And then I also used my distress ink to colour up this little camera wooden piece here. You can see I just pounce that over the top until it gets to the shade that I want, and then I'm ready to start assembly, putting everything together. So I cut out me adding the foam tape onto the back of these pieces. You'll notice I do that a lot throughout the video when I'm using foam tape or foam squares. All I did was use my 3M foam tape and add that to the back of this piece. Peel off the release paper and stick it down, and now I'm using some of my Love From Lizi peel-offs in chocolate. I believe they're listed as chocolate, they're definitely a chocolatey brown, and I am adding those as a kind of fake layer around the edge of this piece. So I'm laying those down, and I made sure that they overlap a little bit, and then I just press my craft knife into the corner, and this just cuts through and leaves a nice mitered edge, so they have a really nice join where they meet together. I added some more foam squares on the back of this aeroplane, this time using scrapbook adhesive foam squares in black, and I will try to remember to add links to as many of these products as I remember to add in the description below. There will definitely be a link to the card kit and all the information about that, and I'll try and remember to include some of the products used as well, but if you ever have any questions about where to get any of the products, just drop me a comment and I'll get back to you. So here I'm just enhancing that kind of ripped and distressed edge. You'll notice that I also ink blended my card base, so wherever the paper peels up there would be the same matching colour underneath. And then I'll finish this off with some of the Nuvo drops just on the heart inside of the camera lens there. Okay, for card 2. So this is a really simple card, it's got a ton of dimension, and I really love kind of how this one came together. This one I am actually going to be giving to Darren because he is having to go away and work away again, so I think this card is perfectly fitting for him. I took one of the cut aparts, and this is actually from the 8x8 patterned paper rather than the larger 12x12 sheets. There are a couple of cut aparts included in the 8x8 paper this month. And I've gone ahead and mounted that on some black foam. This is just some inexpensive craft foam to get some nice even dimension without having to use too much foam tape. It's kind of a little bit quicker and easier sometimes just to use one flat piece. And then I used a mat that I have here that's really great for when you're poking holes through something because it's nice and sturdy. It's got an area in there that's really robust and allows you to kind of poke those holes and have your pokey tool go straight through. And it's not quite self-healing, but it's in that kind of zone. So I poked some holes through and then used some of the brads, almost like that sign was pinned up onto a board, and just added a mat of the aeroplane paper. Then working directly on my card base and trying to line this piece of paper up. I almost got it completely wrong, but I rescued it just at the last minute and stuck that down onto the card base, completely covering the card base. All of the cards that I make this month are 4¼ by 5½. That's generally the card size that I like to work with, and generally our supplies are kind of formatted and sized to work with that particular design. And it is also a piece of US letter size cardstock cut and then folded in half. So I did the same things with my peel-offs, just created a fake layer around the outside edge of this card, and then I'm ready to add on my panel. I've switched to using Tombow Mono. You'll see that I tend to stick between either my ATG or my Tombow Mono. They tend to be my two kind of go-to adhesives. And then I wanted to add a little bit more detail, so again I'm doing another layer. I will kind of cut these out as we go through the editing of these cards, but again just the same thing, going all the way around the outside edge, overlapping where the corners meet, and then going back and just mitering those corners so they join perfectly by pressing my craft knife into the peel-offs and cutting them and pulling away any of that excess. So for this card we've already got a lot of dimension, but I wanted to add a little bit more, so I took one of the chipboard stickers and peeled off the backing, and then just because I wanted to make sure I got a really strong stick on the sticker, I also added a little bit of glue as well. Finally, I'm going to grab some of the twine. There were some gorgeous pieces of twine included in this kit, and I still have a ton left over, so they will probably pop up on some other projects in the future. But I took this one here and wrapped it around the card a couple times, and then I'm going to go ahead and tie it in a knot. I just tucked the tail kind of underneath the whole piece before I tied it in a knot, kind of just off to the left hand side there, so it would bunch all the twine together. And then I trimmed the ends of the twine, and to make sure that it didn't kind of fray or come apart, I just added a small amount of glue onto each of the ends, and it will dry completely clear and kind of hold everything together so it doesn't unravel. I don't always share with you guys the finishing of the insides of my card, but for this one I added a white card panel. This was just some extra cardstock from my stash, and I finished it off decoratively with 2 peel-off stripes at the bottom. Okay, so moving into card 3, I wanted to use the map stamp. This is a beautiful stamp, and I'm definitely going to be using this one on a couple more cards. I only actually used this on one of the cards today, just because of the colouring element. I wanted to show you as many things as possible. So I went ahead and stamped this down onto some scrap white cardstock, and I'm using 3 colours for the ocean, BT1, BT3 and BT2 from the Spectrum Noir alcohol marker range, but you could colour this in with coloured pencils or any markers that you happen to have. And I just made sure to have the kind of darker water near the edges of the islands, and then I coloured in my islands using just 2 markers, and it was GB7 and GB9. Again, I made sure to go over everything and then darken up the outside edge, and then just blend everything together with one final coat of the lighter colour. I did consider doing these as kind of really lush green islands, but I felt like this worked better with the colours that I was going to be using for this card. So here I'm grabbing some of the patterned paper that I cut down to size, and I ran it through my die cut machine, and I don't know what was wrong with me. My eyes were so wonky today. I got that so wonky, I ended up giving up and grabbing another piece and just trying again. This time I'm going to line it up over my map because I knew that I had that in the kind of exact place that I would want it on my final card. And I ran both of those pieces through my die cut machine. So I actually cut out the map piece and also this stamp pattern paper. So I switched out my pattern paper for this one. It's still ever so slightly off center, so do forgive me, but I got it as close as possible, and the rectangle that I've die cut wasn't the exact same size and shape as the map. You can see it's kind of ever so slightly wider, and I will go ahead and correct that using some more peel-offs in just a moment. But because this is going to be a shaker card, I've gone ahead and added some double-sided tape all around the outside of the window that we just cut. And I'll add some acetate to seal that off. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the patterned paper. So this is actually going to be a shaker that allows you to see straight through the front of the card to the inside, which I thought would be kind of an interesting, fun take on a shaker today. I used some more foam from my stash to kind of build up the dimension on this piece, and then filled in the inside of the shaker element with the sequins from the kit. And I'm kind of just making sure they're nicely spread out and they're turned so they're facing the right way up, because once we seal everything in place, they're going to be stuck how they are. They'll be able to move kind of up and down when they shake, but they wouldn't be able to flip over and correct themselves. You can also see that I went around the outside of the window using my peel-offs, and that just helps to bring the width of my window in just a little bit, so it will hide some of the white that is currently showing on this map piece. So I prepped the map with some anti-static powder tool and stamped down the sentiment, and I'm going to be using the Copper Rose embossing powder from the Love From Lizi store. I believe I picked this up as an extra. It was released this month, and it is a beautiful colour. You can see it here in the sentiment, and it was so nice I decided to go right around the edges of my map, again just helping to disguise those white edges because my rectangle die was slightly bigger than my map stamp. And I'm just rubbing my card into the embossing powder to give that embossed edge look. And I decided I wanted to go a little bit heavier with the powder, so I poured it directly on in some places and then just used a brush to soften and kind of roughen up those edges. I didn't want them to be perfect, I wanted it to have that distressed vintage look. And then I'll just grab my heat tool and heat set those, and that helps to disguise all of those white edges and adds a bit of an interesting element and some shine to this map piece. So I think that looks really fun. I'm really pleased with how that turned out. So I'll cover the back of this piece with adhesive and then carefully line it up with the window shaker element that we've just created. I love how this turns out. I really like that fun factor of having the shaker element kind of show right through to the base of the card. And once I had everything lined up, I just folded the card shut, and that allowed me to stick this piece down. Again, it is ever so slightly off center. I was having some troubles with wonky eyes when I was making these cards. I'm not always precise anyway with getting my layers just right, but I think I really struggled this month, so do forgive me. So to finish up the front of the card, I'm grabbing a strip of another patterned paper. At this point my ATG ran out of adhesive, so I'm going to switch to using my Tombow again. And I will press down this little strip of sentiment strips. This was one of the patterned papers, and I think the colours just work perfectly with the map in the background, and it worked out really well with the postage stamps as well, especially considering this wasn't the patterned paper that I originally planned to use for this card. I think it all still came together really nicely. Of course, I used more peel-offs, and then I'll go and trim away the excess. And then to add a final sentiment, kind of a bolder piece across those sentiment strips, I grabbed one of the stickers. This is a larger sticker, but again, I'll just place that down and trim off the excess, and that is this card finished. So on to card 4. For this one I wanted to create some water, and I didn't have a kind of waves border, so I grabbed this cloud border die that I already had in my stash. I believe it's a My Favorite Things border die, and I cut that 3 times from some of the paper that I got as an add-on to the kit. I wanted this card to have an awful lot of texture and dimension to it, so you'll notice that this is obviously the water is very dimensional. You wouldn't usually have water that has kind of embossed roses on it, but I wanted to add all of that texture and interest to an otherwise quite plain and simple design. And I also die cut the sailboat from one of my textured cardstocks from that same add-on bundle. And here I'm just figuring out exactly where I want everything and then using a pencil to outline that so I can figure out the placement of my clouds. So my camera kind of lost focus here, bear with me, it does come back. The rest of the video won't look like this, I promise. But I'm placing my cloud die down and then running it through my die cut machine on the embossing setting rather than the cutting setting. So instead of cutting all the way through, it will just leave an embossed impression of the cloud. And then I did that 3 times, and then I started to stick down the water. I stuck the furthest back layer directly to the card. Then the next one has some foam tape, and then the final one has some more foam tape, so it's got 2 layers of foam tape right at the bottom there. Once I was happy with how all of that sat, I rubbed away any of those pencil lines and then used a spray adhesive for that sailboat because it is intricate. I'd forgotten to use some stick-it adhesive or a similar product to allow there to be adhesive there before I die cut this, so I kind of had no choice but to use a spray adhesive. I think it would have been really messy to do anything else. And then just here, one small piece of the cloud did actually die cut when I was embossing, so I went ahead and made it an accent to this piece and made sure that I poked out a couple pieces on each of the clouds, so there were some tiny areas that were die cut and everything else was just embossed. I used some of the gold mirror cardstock to create a flag and stamp down the Bon Voyage sentiment, and again used some more of that copper rose embossing powder. It is so very beautiful in real life, and stuck that down with some more foam tape. So a really simple design, but I really like how that one looked. So for card 5, I reached into my stash to find this sticky back adhesive cork, and I wanted to create almost like a bulletin board, like a memory bulletin board. So I added the sticky back cork to an extra piece of white card from my stash just to give it a little bit more stability. And then I trimmed down this cut apart piece. To me, it looked like a holiday photograph, so I cut that down and then I grabbed the stickers, and I wanted to look at some of the pieces that you would potentially have on a bulletin board. So when I was younger, I had a bulletin board like this that was covered in printed out photographs from different kind of gigs and things that I'd done with my friends, any tickets from when we went to the cinema or tickets from gigs that we went to. And it's kind of giving me that like reminiscing vibe. So I picked a few different pieces and tried to figure out what my layout would be. I added the stickers to that same scrap of white card just to add a bit more stability and thickness to them, because I knew that I was going to be poking holes through them and I didn't want anything to rip or tear. So once I was happy with the layout, I did end up getting rid of the banner, but other than that I think I'm pretty much there. I brought back in that black foam again so I could poke some holes. My camera really didn't like it and decided to go out of focus again, so do forgive me, it does come back again, and I believe that was the last time I had an issue with it. But I'm just going ahead and poking some holes into that piece and then pressing through some of those little split pins that we got in the kit. I think this is possibly my favourite card. I always find it difficult to pick, but this one I really like. It really reminds me of my bedroom when I was younger and that whole like memory keeping. I was never really into scrapbooking when I was younger. I don't think I really was aware of it as a concept. I think if I had have been, I definitely would have been a scrapbooker when I was younger, but I love to keep pictures and ticket stubs and different memorabilia and things pinned up on notice boards in my room. So yeah, this one's giving me some nostalgia. Once I was happy with that piece, I'll add some more liquid adhesive and go ahead and stick that down to my card base. Of course, I did get that cork from my stash, and if you don't have something similar to that, you could always print out the pattern of some cork. You could maybe get like a downloadable and print that out and use that as your pattern paper and get a similar effect if you're interested. And I just finished that up with a sentiment on the inside. Okay, card 6, a really simple design, possibly joint for my favourite card, even though it's so very simple. So I've cut out a couple different pieces of the patterned paper and I have this sticker. I wanted to go ahead and tuck that behind this piece, so luckily I'd used liquid adhesive. I had a little bit of playtime before that kind of locked itself in place. And you'll notice that my sleeves have changed. This is actually the next day. I tend to work my cards that way. I tend to do maybe 5 of them in one sitting and 5 of them in another, but it really does vary month to month. So I used some more of the peel-offs to outline those pieces and then grabbed this super long sticker. This is I don't even know how many inches, but it's almost more sized for a 12 by 12 scrapbook. But you can see if you trim off the edges here, it works beautifully on a card. And then this piece here is probably what makes this my favourite. This little road sign piece with the Explore the World stamp I think just looks beautiful. And I still had my distress ink on my desk from when I made card number 1. So I grabbed that vintage photo distress ink and distressed the edges of this piece just so it would help it pop from the background and kind of stand apart. I grabbed some more of my scrapbook adhesive foam squares and stuck that down in the top left hand corner. And then I'll go ahead and add this piece to my card base, and that card is finished. So as I say, super simple, really easy design to recreate, but I'm really pleased with how this one turned out. And yeah, I think 5 and 6 are my top favourite, but you guys let me know in the comments which ones are yours. So card 7, this time I'm using a diagonal stripe and the white card base. I look super stripy on screen right now with my stripy sleeves and my stripy paper. So I grabbed this and of course added a peel off along the edge. It has to be done. They're definitely addictive. And how fun are those new peel off boxes? I managed to get my hands on a peel off box. Lizzie was kind enough to send one to me, and they are wonderful for your embossing powder and your peel offs, which is great. So everybody loves to be organized, and I need all the help I can get in that department. So while I was talking about the peel off boxes, I cut away the string from the white tag and replaced it with some of the twine. I felt it was a little bit prettier and it fitted a little better with the card design. And then I'm just building up another kind of collage onto my tag and adding a sticker as the sentiment. I wanted to cover up where it says airport with my sentiment, and I just added some anti-static powder tool onto the back to neutralize the stick of the sticker so I could go ahead and add some foam squares in its place. Once I had everything stuck down, I added some more foam squares all over the back of the tag and then just added that onto the card. I then spent longer than anybody should playing with the twine. I actually cut out quite a bit of that. I was trying to figure out exactly how I wanted it to lie, and once I had it figured out in my head, I just added 2 small dots of glue and pressed it into those dots and left it to dry, and that will hold everything in place just where I want it. And then I added 3 Nuvo drops in various sizes from small to large, just as a little accent piece in the corner. So on to card 8 again. I'm working with one of the cut apart pieces, but this time I trimmed it down. So I wanted to leave this in so you could see that this particular image came from one of the cut apart pieces. I just trimmed it down so it would be much smaller. And I just wanted to have some fun playing with some matting and layering for this particular design. So I've got my cut apart trimmed down, and then I have some of the gold mirror, the gold matte mirror, as a mat for behind it. Then I have a square of this patterned paper that I'm just cutting in half to create 2 triangles, and again I'll glue those down to a piece of the patterned paper. The patterned paper has been cut slightly shorter, or slightly smaller rather, than the card base, again just to add another layer of matting and layering, so there's some fun with the depth on this piece. Once I had those 2 triangles stuck down, I went ahead and outlined both of them with my peel-offs. I've cut out some of the footage because you've seen me do this so many times now in this video alone, never mind my other videos if you are a subscriber. If you're not and you're lurking, you can go ahead and click the subscribe button. I'll get that in there now while you're still here. And so I outlined both of those triangles and added some foam tape onto the back of this topper piece and placed that in the center. And you can see the 2 corners kind of overlap each of the triangles, so it's just a really fun design. And then I used a sticker that says adventure as the sentiment on this piece. I'll grab some more of that liquid adhesive and press it down. I'm definitely better working with liquid adhesive when it comes to precise matting and layering. I don't know why I don't do it more, but I always reach for my ATG, and because it sticks instantly, you don't get that wiggle time. So I don't know, maybe I need to rethink things and use my liquid adhesive a little more. So I finished up with some Nuvo drops and we are on to card 9. So for card 9, I'm adding some twine around this patterned paper panel, and I'm just adding that in place using some sellotape. I find that that tends to be the easiest thing when it's going to be hidden. It sticks instantly and it holds in place really nice. And then I covered the whole of this piece in some 3M foam tape, so double-sided foam tape, and I'll stick that down to the card base. So we've got some nice dimension with that stripe running down the, well, it's not quite centre, but running down the card. And then I'm going to grab some of those tiny little square cut apart pieces from the 12 by 12 sheet that has a ton of squares. Some of them I've trimmed down to be a little smaller, and I've left the sentiment as the biggest piece, but I've trimmed each of them so they're not quite the same size as they are in the cut apart sheet, and that was just to help them fit on this card design. I'm using these tiny little pegs to hold them in place and creating, again, I guess just kind of a collage or a memory piece. I think from making that bulletin board card, I was kind of stuck in that vibe and really enjoying it, and this card kit lends itself really nicely to that. So then I just popped each of those up with a foam square underneath so they weren't kind of so floppy. I wanted to make sure everything held in place really nicely, and that card is finished. So onto card 10, again another really simple design that you could recreate over and over. That's why I don't use liquid adhesive. I managed to get it all over my thumb when I was trying to put it on the back of my card, so I tend to be messy with liquid adhesive. So what I gain in my ability to fix any of my wonky layers, I just create chaos in mess all over my craft desk. So once I had everything stuck down and I was cleaned up, I added some of those brown peel-offs again around the outside edge, and then I'm working with those self-adhesive chipboard pieces. They are self-adhesive and they will definitely stick down, but I like to make sure that there is a guaranteed strong hold on there, so I do tend to add a little bit of extra adhesive. I'm not entirely sure it's needed, it's just that's what I'm doing, so I'm trying to explain it and rationalize it. It's not necessary, but I like to add a little bit of extra adhesive before I stick those pieces down. So I've added that really large sentiment, the hot air balloon, and then this lovely little kind of map place point. I don't know what they're called. Do they have, well, everything has a name. I'm sure it has a proper name, but this one's really cute and it has a heart in it. And then I finished this off by adding some Nouveau right in the center of each of the kind of compass images in the background. It took a little minute, so I have, of course, sped this up. But then that is card 10 finished. So here I just wanted to show you, I don't always do this, but I wanted to show you the leftovers. I had so much left over from this kit. I had so much paper. Some of that's the add-on paper that I got. You're probably wondering where all of those chipboard stickers have gone. I'll show you in just a moment. I've also got a ton of stickers left and almost an entire 12 by 12 pattern paper piece. I have all of the embossing powders that I picked up, some of those pins and brads left over. And then here is the box that I like to organize everything in. So you can see I've got a ton of ephemera, cut aparts, the chipboard stickers, obviously my dies and the twine. And now let's jump in to a recap of the cards. If you have any questions at all about the Love From Lizi card kit or how it works, then do feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section. I will have links in the description below to the kits, and you can see where you can pick up a subscription if that's something that you're interested in. If not, then set a reminder in your diary for the 19th of the month, because that is when the kit is released and they tend to sell out quite quickly. So if you're interested in getting hold of next month's kit, then do set an alarm for the 19th of the month, and I believe this kit is now sold out. However, do go and check the Love From Lizi website, as there may still be some items available for sale. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. On screen right now are a couple more that I think you might enjoy. If you haven't already seen them, go ahead and click on the thumbnails to be taken through to the video. If you're not already a subscriber, I'd love to have you subscribed. You can click the subscribe icon and tap the bell notification if you would like to be notified every time I post a video. But that is all from me today. I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.